TYT Sports, everybody. Ben Mankewicz here. Wes Welker, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, has suffered another concussion in the third preseason game on a hit by Texans safety DJ Swearinger, who sounds like he was in Deadwood. Here's a look at the hit. As you can see, it's not terribly vicious, and Swearinger's response that he'd led with his shoulder was the only thing I can do, he said. Welker's a short guy. Bill O'Brien, the Texans head coach, who knows Wes Welker from coaching the offense in New England before he left to go to Penn State, was sympathetic to Welker's injury, but defended his new player, Swearinger, by saying that, look, the way that he led with his shoulder and Welker got low and then his shoulder met head and Welker got a concussion. So Peyton Manning was furious at Swearinger. He threw a touchdown pass, I think, on the next play, and then drew himself a 15-yard penalty, which you don't see from Peyton Manning very often because he talked trash to Swearinger as he left the field. I get what everybody did. I get why Manning would be angry, and Manning hadn't seen a replay. I think it was just the kind of, like, all concussions in the NFL aren't caused by overly aggressive behavior. They're caused by incredibly talented, very physical, large athletes moving at incredibly high speeds and running into each other. This one seemed like an accidental concussion. Whether it was intentional or not, obviously, the intent wasn't to cause a concussion. Whether the hit was legal or not is a better way to put it. The important thing is it is a concussion, and it's another concussion for Wes Welker. First, let's take the argument away from Welker and look at the overall picture of concussions. Forbes has a really interesting piece this week from Dan Diamond, who's a contributor to Ford. And he's got this statistic from NFL concussions, and NFL concussions has in the last year or so become the go-to source for keeping track of concussions in the NFL. There have been 61 concussions so far in the NFL this preseason. 61. In the preseason, there's still a game to go. We're only 3/4 done with the preseason. That is up from 40 last year, so a 67% increase, a better than 67% increase in the number of concussions. As Diamond points out, the surge in reported concussions doesn't reflect a change in the game. Instead, chalk it up to a rise in concussion awareness. But then he has this little nugget, which is very telling and shows you that the NFL's commitment to this, to eradicating concussions, significantly reducing concussions. They're talking a good game. They're doing way more than they were doing 5 years ago, 2 years ago, and that's great. They're still not quite fully embracing it because of this. The actual number of concussions, writes Diamonds, is undoubtedly higher. NFL teams are not required to report concussions in the preseason. Why not? Your head doesn't know whether it's week 6 or week 2 of the preseason. A concussion's a concussion in an NFL game. Not reporting them in the preseason, not having a requirement to report them in the preseason is crazy. Nonetheless, because of aggressive reporting in the press, I suspect that there aren't a lot of concussions that are sliding through, but you know what? I don't know, and they should be reported. So those numbers are incredibly telling. Now let's get to a more specific picture and talk a little bit about Wes Welker. Dan Diamond, in that Forbes piece, quoted a piece from columnist Jeff Pearlman, who's a terrific journalist, that Pearlman wrote last year. And here's when Welker suffered his second concussion of the season last year. Welker, by the way, has now had 3 concussions in the last 11 months. 3 concussions in 11 months with this one he suffered against the Broncos in the preseason game. But now let's go back to last year in a column that Pearlman wrote. Here it is. Earlier today, in a win against the Tennessee Titans, you suffered a concussion, your second of the season. Again, this was last season. Your what? 8th, 9th, 10th of your career? You keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And here's where Pearlman makes a great point. And the analysts and color commentators routinely praise your courage and toughness. That's right, they do, consistently. His courage and toughness, especially to make a slightly different point, because he's little and white, and we love talking about the toughness of little white guys. Then Pearlman goes on, and this is great and bold and the kind of columnist that I could never be. Well, I don't think you're courageous, writes Pearlman, or tough. I think you're fucking stupid. Wes, he goes on, have you not been paying attention to the news on CTE and concussions and the hundreds upon hundreds of former NFL players who can't remember their names, who wind up at assisted living facilities drinking strained peas through a straw? I'm being 100% serious here. These men, like you, believed in the bullshit machismo code of the NFL, which dictates one plays hard and plays all the time. Physical and mental damage be damned. These men, like you, had their bells rung repeatedly, yet tried their best to hide said information from team doctors, if the team doctors even really cared, which oftentimes they didn't. That was good stuff. That's last year from Jeff Perlman. I missed it there, but Dan Diamond of Forbes bringing it to everybody's attention again. Now that Welker has suffered his third concussion, we don't know what his prognosis is, but I think it's fair to say that, look, I'm not Wes Welker. People get to make their own decisions, but his prognosis ought to be, I'm retired. That's it. And then he can go up to the booth and he can talk about the courage and toughness of other guys.